Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at how to make some coil pots for early elementary students. We're going to be using a piece of clay. I have this jar just so that I have a nice circle that matches the bottom of my bowl over here to use as a cutting template, and some nice slip and a pencil for reference when I'm working on things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take off a piece of this clay. I don't need the whole thing right away. And I'm going to go through and kind of get a chunk like that, and I can tap it gently on my table. And I have a nice canvas here for my work surface so my clay doesn't stick to it. If you're ever working on a smooth surface, you want to make sure you put down some sort of material that the clay comes up off of easily. Canvas happens to be one of those. I'm going to kind of tap it a little bit into a circle because I have a circle that's going in the bottom of my bowl to start my structure. I'm using a styrofoam bowl. If you have a regular bowl that you're working with, you can also line it with newspaper first and then build on top of that so that it dumps out nice and easy. And then I'm just going to take the heel of my hand and I'm going to press it out. If you have a rolling pin, you could also do this with a rolling pin at home. And I want it about pencil thickness, so I check it by pushing the pencil up against it every once in a while. And if it's still a little taller than the pencil, I can push it down a little bit more, like that. And then I can flip it over if I want to see the smooth side of things. I can use my cookie cutter or my template and cut out that circle that's going to go in the bottom of my bowl, like that. So now I have a nice neat circle that fits quite nicely in the bottom of this bowl. It doesn't leave any big gaps. I'm going to build up from around the edges of this. Now, when I'm going to do my coiling, I'm going to take off another chunk of the clay, and I'm working in small bits that fit very well within the palm of my hand. And the first thing I want to do is kind of squish it into a cylinder type shape. Now, when I roll from here to here in my hand as much as possible, because if I start rolling up to my fingers, you start getting these little grooves in your clay. So the next thing you do is you put it down on a flat surface, and you want to make sure when you're rolling on a flat surface you start at the tip of your fingers and you go all the way down to the bottom of your hand, your palm down here. Now, that might mean that you start with one hand if the clay isn't big enough to go with two hands. And I'm going to roll back and forth. If at any time it feels like it's getting to be wider and thinner on one side, you can go back through and tap it a little bit to even it back out, and then you can keep rolling. As it gets bigger and you get to a point where both of your hands can help roll this out, you can switch over to two hands to work on rolling it. And I start in the middle and work my way out to the ends. And as you do this, it naturally starts stretching that coil a little bit more. I try to work from my fingertips down to the bottom of my palm. As you do this, sometimes you'll get areas that are a little thinner or a little thicker. You can go back in and just work those thicker areas and try and get them to even out to the end. If it gets too long and it starts flipping all over the place and causing trouble, the other thing you can do is go back in and take a piece off, put it off to the side, resume working on your half that you saved here. And I, for the purposes of the smaller bowl, like to try and get these around pencil thickness to work with today. So when you get to that point, you might have to do a little bit more single-handed back and forth. So I'm stretching it this direction, then I can switch over and stretch it and roll it the other direction. Trying to keep it nice and even, the same thickness. If I find a section that's a little thicker, again, I'm going to work that spot out a little bit more. Now, you don't want to get this any thinner than a pencil. If you do, you'll start ending up getting little tears and rips in it like this section over here, so you have to be very careful. Now, I want to do that beautiful snail shell pattern first to start building up my coils around here, but this is a really big coil if I want to do that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half, and then I'm just going to coil half of it first. So I'm going to start really slow, and I keep fingers pinched and pushing on both sides as it goes around to make that coil. And I'm going nice and slow because I don't want it to break. If it starts getting a little dry feeling or you start seeing some cracks, you can put a little bit of that slip on there or get your fingers wet with some water and keep working it. So I'm pinching gently and working it around. And when I come down to this end down here, I can add a little bit of that slip and smooth it over. So I have this nice little coil. So that's my back side where it's been pushing. It's not as fancy as my front side. So when I put it into my bowl, I'm going to put the back side facing in and the fancy side putting out. Now, this is flat and this is flat. They're not going to want to stick together. I need to do some scoring. So around the edges, you can use a pencil or a needle tool or an awl, and you're just going to rough it up. And roughing it up will make it a little bit like a zipper or like Velcro. So if I rough up this side, if you're using Velcro, does Velcro work with only one piece? Nope, you need both sides. So I rough up that side for one side of Velcro, and then I rough up the other side here for the other side of the Velcro. Put a little bit of that slip on there, get it wet and kind of mud-like, and then I gently put it in here and I wiggle, wiggle, push so that it feels like it's connected. And then I can take a little bit of that slip and fill in the back side to smooth it out onto my bowl and on the back. And we're going to continue all the way around with those spirals. Now when I put a second one in, I want it to push down and sideways so that it fits snug against the other one that I already put in there earlier. And I'll put some more of that slip in there to smooth it out and keep it nice and stuck together. Kind of like that. Now, as I went around, you can see all of my spirals are about the same size, but the last one that has to fit in here might have to have more of an oval shape so that it fits in here. I want it the same height, so I'm going to make it just as thick, but then I'm going to have to squeeze it into more of an oval instead of a circle. Now, to make sure I really have these areas filled in, what I'm going to do is take some of my extra coil that I have left over, and I'm going to firmly push it down in here. I want to smooth it out to make sure there aren't any extra holes or cracks that are around that outside. Kind of put it in there, and then push and smooth. So you won't even be able to tell that I did this when I'm finished. Smooth around the edges, like that. Now I'm going to do my next layer. I have little gaps in here, so I think what I'll do is I'll take off little pieces of what I had before left over from Coil, and I'll roll them into little spheres. You can roll them and then sort of tap them with your fingers a little bit like little peas, and then I'm going to stick those in between on each of the sections all the way around. Now I'm going to work on my next layer. I think I'm just going to do a straight coil all the way around. So I want to roll out a nice long one. I'm going to get a nice piece and all the way from fingers to the heel until I start getting it rolled out big enough that I can switch to two hands. Just like that, and then work from the middle out. And if you have trouble working from the middle out, sometimes people tug a little too hard this way and it breaks. You can start at one end as long as you're going all the way from the tips of your fingers to the heel of your hand and work it all the way down to one end. And you want to do this until it's big enough that it's going, you know, you can do a dry fit, which means you just put it down there while it's dry. You haven't scored or slipped anything yet. Make sure it fits, and I can see where it's going to match up over here. So I can kind of break it off a little bit. There is where it's going to match up. And like I did before, I need to make sure I go through and score this a little bit so that it has something to stick to, some Velcro that's in there. I want to be careful not to destroy, oh, see, like my little beads. I don't want those to pop out. I want them to stay in there when I go through and work on this. So be gentle with your beads, haha. And then for this part, I'm going to score just one side of my coil a little bit, rough it up, because the rough side of the Velcro has to touch the other side. This is scoring. And then we're going to put the slimy stuff in between. Again, that is our slip. I get some of that slip on there, load it up on my finger, gently spread it around. You don't need a whole bunch of it, just enough to get everything kind of damp, like that. And I'm going to turn this over so the rough touches the rough areas. I'm going to gently but firmly push it down for the next layer because I don't want to smush all of that other hard work that I did, right? I'm going to keep that in there. And when it wraps back around, I'm going to smooth it out. So I might have to get a little slip on my finger and smooth it out. And then I'm going to gently push. I want it to kind of be the same height. Keep your finger nice and wet with that slip, and it'll help make it nice and smooth. And then like we did before, I have gaps inside of here now, right? I want to fill those in so I can get some more of my clay, and I can put it in there, and I can gently push it and slide it out and smooth it out to fill in those gaps. The other thing you can do is you can load up your finger with some of that slip mud, and you can go in there and fill in those cracks with the slip mud so that it smooths it all out. And that'll keep it a little thinner for you. It won't get quite as thick in the kiln. You don't have to worry about air pockets getting in there and things exploding when the air pressure builds up. It's kind of like a balloon, right? If you put air in a balloon, when you heat up air, it expands. Well, if you hit the edge limit of that balloon, what happens to the balloon if it keeps expanding? Eventually it pops. Your clay can do the same thing once it gets hard and has an air bubble trapped in there, and then it will explode in the kiln. Now I have this one little edge left. I think what I'm going to do there is I'm going to do a little zigzag. So with a coil, I'm going to go through, I'm going to bend it back and forth like this. And you want to keep it the same height. You don't want to let it get bigger and bigger. You want to keep it nice and small like that. And I'm going to make some of these, and same thing, right? I have to score up that edge a little bit. Same thing on here where it sticks together. If you don't do this, it'll just fall apart. Put a little slip on there, and I'm going to push down firmly but gently, right? And I can smooth out that inside a little bit, kind of like that. And I'm going to keep repeating this all the way around the edge. Once you're finished and you've smoothed it out, what you're going to do is put that over on the drying rack, and next week when it dries out, your teacher will peel off this wrapper and then put the bowl in the kiln. You'll see it again when it's time to glaze it.